The evening air was thick with tension, like a storm just waiting to break. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the soft flicker of the candlelight dancing on the walls. But the warmth in the room didn't reach my heart. Everything felt off. My wife, Amanda, had been distant for weeks, her eyes always glued to her phone. Her responses brief, her touch colder than it had ever been before. I'd been ignoring the little signs, convincing myself that it was just stress from work or the pressures of life. But tonight, as we sat across from each other in silence, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I watched her, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her wine glass, lost in thought. The woman I had once known, the one who would smile at me across the room, the one who shared her dreams, her fears. Her laughter felt like a stranger now. I cleared my throat, my voice breaking through the quiet. "Amanda, what's going on? You've been so distant. What's happening?" She didn't look up immediately. When she finally did, her eyes were cold, unfeeling, almost calculating. Her lips parted, and for a moment, I wondered if she would offer an apology or perhaps an explanation. But instead, she simply spoke, her tone as sharp as a blade. "I don't need you anymore," she said, her voice dripping with an eerie calmness. "I have 3 other men lined up. I can replace you." Just like that. The words hit me like a slap in the face. How could she say that? How could the woman I loved, who had promised forever, utter something so cold, so cruel? I didn't know how to respond. My heart raced, my mind went blank. Was this real? Was it really happening? It was then that I realized something deep inside me. This wasn't love. This was something else entirely. Her words hung in the air like a suffocating cloud, thick and oppressive. I could hardly breathe. The room felt smaller, colder, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. I had asked for the truth, but I never expected it to be delivered so brutally, so casually. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen, unable to move, my mind desperately trying to comprehend what she had just said. "I have 3 other men lined up. I can replace you," Amanda repeated, her voice void of any emotion. There was no anger, no guilt, just a chilling indifference. She wasn't yelling or pleading. She wasn't even ashamed. It was as if she were speaking about something trivial, like choosing between brands of cereal at the grocery store. I felt a surge of heat rise in my chest. Anger, hurt, confusion, all blending into one chaotic feeling. But it wasn't just the words that cut me. It was the detachment in her voice. This wasn't the woman I had married. She wasn't the same person who used to laugh with me on lazy Sunday mornings, the one who would stay up late talking about our future, our dreams. No, this Amanda was someone different, someone unrecognizable. "I don't need you, and frankly, I haven't needed you for a while," she continued, her eyes flicking back to her phone screen, as if our entire relationship could be summed up in a few sentences and dismissed just as easily. "You're too predictable, too comfortable. I need something more, something exciting." Her words sliced through me like a blade, leaving a cold, raw wound behind. I had always tried to be the steady one, the one who was there day after day, supporting her, offering stability. But now, in the harsh light of her revelation, I realized that my steady presence, the very thing I thought was a strength, was the reason she had grown bored. To her, I had become a background character in her life, no longer the leading man. And the worst part was that, for months, I hadn't even seen it coming. "Exciting?" My voice came out in a shaky whisper. I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my tone. You're talking about cheating?" She finally put the phone down, her gaze meeting mine. There was no remorse in her eyes, only a strange, almost cold satisfaction. "If that's what you want to call it. I'm not cheating. I'm just exploring my options." My stomach twisted, and I could feel a lump forming in my throat. Exploring my options. Those words echoed in my head like a haunting refrain, and I realized something crucial. Amanda had already checked out of this marriage long, before she even admitted it to me. She had moved on. Emotionally, mentally, she just hadn't bothered to tell me until now. There was no apology, no explanation about how things had gone wrong, or why she felt the need to find excitement elsewhere. There was only her detached indifference. I've met these guys online, she added, as if it were a casual comment. They give me attention. They make me feel desired in ways you haven't in a long time. And honestly, I'm tired of waiting for you to get the hint. You've been so wrapped up in your work, in your routines, that you didn't even notice me slipping away. I had to get what I needed elsewhere. It's not my fault. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was blaming me for her choices, her actions, as if I had somehow driven her to do this. The anger that had been building inside me exploded in that moment, but it wasn't the kind of rage that made me want to shout or throw things. No, it was something colder, something darker, a deep, gnawing sadness, a realization that I had been living in a lie. I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. The woman who once promised to love me through thick and thin was sitting across from me, telling me she had already planned her escape. And in that instant, something inside me snapped. It wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. You've already made your choice, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. And it's clear that I don't even matter to you anymore. Amanda didn't respond. She simply stared at me, as if waiting for me to argue, to beg, to fight for her. But I didn't. I couldn't. I wasn't going to beg for the affection of someone who had already replaced me in her heart. Instead, I stood up slowly, my legs shaking slightly from the weight of the moment. The realization hit me hard. I wasn't going to be a second choice. I wasn't going to be someone's backup option. I had been giving her all of myself, and now I was left with nothing but the hollow echo of what we once had. I'm done, I said quietly, my voice steady, yet filled with an underlying pain. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a strange sense of freedom. Freedom from the lies, from the manipulation, from the idea that I was disposable. It was over, and I was walking away. I left the room without another word, the door clicking softly behind me, but the weight of Amanda's revelation was crushing. I walked out into the night, my steps slow, deliberate, as if I were trying to outrun the suffocating thoughts spiraling in my mind. The cool evening air did nothing to calm the fever burning inside me. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away, to breathe, to think. As I paced down the dimly lit street, I replayed the conversation over and over in my head. Her words echoed like a constant drumbeat. I can replace you. I have 3 options. Each time they hit me, they hurt a little more, like shards of glass piercing my skin. How had I missed the signs? How had I failed to see that the woman I loved had already made her escape, both physically and emotionally, while I was too busy trying to keep everything together? I stopped by a small park, the quiet on the city in the distance, and sat down on a bench, my hands gripping the cold metal, as if it were the only thing holding me together. The truth hit me with brutal clarity. She didn't love me anymore. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel it, to feel the betrayal, the deep ache in my chest, the pain of realizing I had been living in a relationship that was nothing more than a facade. It was like waking up from a dream and realizing everything you believed in was a lie. I had loved her with everything I had, trusted her completely, only to find out that she had been planning her exit for months, maybe even longer. But then, as the minutes ticked by, something shifted inside me. The pain was still there, raw and all-consuming, but with it came a flicker of something else. Anger, yes, but also a strange sense of liberation. I realized I didn't have to keep fighting for something that wasn't meant to be. I didn't have to beg for her love. The moment she told me I was replaceable, I realized that I, too, had the power to walk away, to reclaim my life, my dignity, my worth. And that's exactly what I was going to do. The turning point wasn't just realizing she didn't care anymore. It was realizing that I deserved better, and I wasn't going to settle for anything less. The night dragged on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me had irrevocably changed. I walked in circles around the park, not knowing where I was going or how to process the overwhelming flood of emotions that had suddenly swept over me. My mind felt like a battlefield, anger clashing with betrayal, hurt battling with a strange new sensation of empowerment. It was in that quiet, lonely space that I realized I had a choice. I didn't have to keep chasing someone who had already decided she didn't want me anymore. The truth was right there in front of me, as clear as the stars above. I had been clinging to a relationship that had already ended long before Amanda had opened her mouth tonight. The weight of that truth was painful, but it also gave me clarity. I was done. I hadn't truly grasped the depth of my feelings until now, until I saw how little I had left in this marriage. What had once been love had turned into an empty routine, a stale partnership where one person had checked out long ago. I had convinced myself that if I just worked harder, if I gave more of myself, if I loved her enough, she'd come back to me. But tonight, she had stripped that illusion away, leaving me raw, exposed, but ultimately free. I felt an odd sense of calm settle over me. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight for a love that wasn't there, for a woman who didn't see me as her partner anymore, but as an option she could easily replace. The truth was, she had already replaced me, in her mind, and perhaps even in her heart. The cold realization made my stomach churn, but it also sparked something in me, something strong, something defiant. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a moment. Part of me wondered if I should text her, confront her one last time, demand an explanation, or maybe just pour out my heart and tell her how much she had hurt me. But then I stopped. No, I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need her to validate my worth. I had been waiting for her approval, for her affection, but that waiting had only kept me trapped in a life that wasn't mine. I had lost myself in the process. It was time to stop waiting. I sent a simple message. I'm leaving. Don't try to contact me. As my thumb hit send, a weight seemed to lift from my chest. It was done. There was no going back. I wasn't going to be the man who stayed in a relationship out of fear of being alone or out of some misguided sense of duty. I was going to take control of my life, my happiness, my future, and I wasn't going to let someone's inability to love me keep me shackled. I stood up from the bench, my mind clearer than it had been in months. The cool night air felt refreshing on my face, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't know what the future held or where this path would take me, but I knew one thing for sure. I was walking away and I was choosing myself, and that in itself was enough. The days that followed felt like a blur. I moved through them like someone walking out of fog, each step a bit clearer than the last. At first, there was only silence. Amanda didn't try to contact me. There were no texts, no calls, no frantic attempts to get me to come back. I half expected her to reach out, to beg, to tell me that it was all a mistake, but she didn't. And that hurt. It stung more than I could have imagined, but it also solidified my decision. I spent the first few nights in a rented apartment. It was small, sterile, nothing like the warm home Amanda and I had once shared. I tried to fill the emptiness with noise. TV, music, anything to drown out the thoughts swirling in my head. But no matter what I did, the reality of what had happened kept crashing into me like a relentless wave. I was alone. The pain of it, the sudden loss of the future I thought we were building together, hit me hard. I would wake up in the middle of the night, my chest tight, the weight of the separation pressing down on me. I missed her. I missed the idea of her, the version of her I thought I knew, the woman who had once held my hand during tough times, laughed at silly jokes, dreamed of a life together. But now I knew that woman had never really been there, at least not in the way I had believed. The real Amanda had already moved on, and the version I had been holding on to was a ghost. But slowly, as the days turned into weeks, I started to find a sense of freedom in the stillness. It wasn't easy. Every day felt like a battle against the sadness, the doubt, the loneliness that still clung to me like a second skin. But I was beginning to see that I wasn't defined by this marriage. I wasn't defined by someone else's decision to leave me behind. I was my own person, whole, complete, and worthy of love. I started to reconnect with friends I had lost touch with over the years. I'd spent so much time focusing on Amanda, on our life together, that I had neglected relationships that had once been a source of joy. Now, those same friends were the ones who helped me rebuild my confidence. They reminded me of who I was before all of this, before the layers of hurt and insecurity had clouded my vision. One night, I met up with Jake, a buddy from college I hadn't seen in ages. We sat at a bar, laughing over beers, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, he leaned back in his chair, eyeing me carefully. "You know, man, you're better off," he said, his voice low but firm. "She wasn't the one for you. You've got more going for you than you realize." His words, though simple, hit me like a revelation. I'd been so focused on what I had lost that I hadn't taken time to appreciate what I had left myself. I had to remember that the future was still mine to shape. I spent more time outdoors, taking long walks through the city, finding solace in the simple things: the rustling of the leaves of wind, the quiet hum of a coffee shop, the warmth of sunlight on my face. Little by little, I began to piece myself back together. I started reading books I'd neglected, picking up hobbies I'd abandoned in the rush of marriage and responsibility. I even joined a local gym, not to lose weight or get fitter, but because I wanted to feel strong again, to reclaim a sense of power over my own body. Of course, the loneliness still crept in at times. There were moments when the ache was so intense I thought I might crumble under it. On those nights, I would lie awake, wondering if I had made the right decision. What if I had tried harder? What if I had fought for her? But then I would remember her words, cold and dismissive. "I can replace you." And I realized no one could replace me. As the weeks turned into months, I grew more confident in my own choices. I had walked away from a toxic relationship, yes, but I had also chosen to stand up for myself. I was no longer waiting for someone else to validate my worth. I was creating a new life for myself, one where I could be happy without depending on someone else's approval. And then one morning, as I watched the sunrise from my new apartment window, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. I didn't have all the answers yet, and there were still scars that needed healing, but I was no longer that broken man who had walked out of my old life in the dead of night. I was someone else now, someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who knew his worth. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and that in itself was enough. The days that followed were not without their challenges, but with each passing moment, I grew stronger. I learned that love begins with self-respect, and that no one has the right to make you feel replaceable. Walking away was a defeat. It was an act of reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my happiness. I didn't need her approval to feel whole. I realized I was enough on my own. The future was still uncertain, but it was mine to shape. And with that, I knew I was finally free, ready to embrace the person I was meant to become.